Hi, this is a short video about the key principles of documentary photography. Documentary photography is the practice of making a photograph which is an accurate representation of its subject. So it is a photograph that represents the thing that it is taking a photo of, that it is a photo of, the subject, in a way that is accurate and not embellished. Documentary photographers are expected to capture the world or everyday life as it exists without managing, directing, or editing the scene. So it's about taking a photo of something without manipulating it, without moving things, without editing it afterwards. It's about documenting things as they are. It provides a straightforward and accurate representation of people, places, objects, and events, and is often used in reportage. Reportage is a word for like reporting and news. So as a documentary photographer, your goal is not to take a pretty picture, but to document an event or place, etc., and to tell its story accurately, and accurately is the key word there. So we will be looking at 6 key principles. The first one we'll be looking at the variations in the genre. So documentary photography is a broad I don't want to say genre. It's a broad field, and there are many genres within that could be defined as documentary photography. Then we're going to be talking about shooting automatic, editing, storytelling, composition, and lighting. So the first one I'll talk about is genre variations. So as I said, it's a broad topic. It essentially talks about, essentially documentary photography is about documenting events, people, places. So there are many things that come under this. So photojournalism is one form of documentary photography. Photojournalism is photographs like of news events. So like a war photographer would be a photojournalist, who's a person that goes to, or a person that goes to the Olympic Games and documents, you know, what happens in the city. For instance, this photo here, like, let's just assume this is a photo from the Brazil Olympics, the Rio de Janeiro Olympics, and these kids are running through the streets throwing balls in the air. So a photojournalist would be the person that had documented this event by going there and taking photographs. Also, as well as photojournalism, there is a form of photography called editorial photography, which is similar to photojournalism, but relating to more magazines and those sorts of publications. So where you would get a magazine and there might be a double-page spread about this new TV show that this particular actor is acting in, and then there might be a whole article with an interview and everything with this actor, and then there'll be photos of that actor. So those photos are editorial photos because they are photos that are accompanying the text and the written part of that story. So so documentary photography is about photos that tell a story in a way that is sort of complementary to a textual thing. And forgive me for eating a biscuit while I talk. Additionally to editorial photography, photojournalism, travel photography is another form of documentary photography, because a person goes to a place and they're documenting what that place is like. This example here. Documenting what that place is like through photography. And sports photography is another example. A person goes to a football match and is documenting what's happening at that football match by taking photos. So there are a few genres, and wedding as well I put in there. So wedding is another form of documentary photography because you're documenting that event. And although in this case it's not for publication purposes, but it's still the documenting of an event. So documentary photography, editorial photography, photojournalism, sports photography, and travel photography all sort of are similar in that way, that the primary focus is you have a person, an event, or a place, and you're documenting that person, place, or event or thing in a way that is accurate and not overly edited. Okay. Another biscuit. So the nature of this type of photography is that it has to be quick and in the moment and spontaneous. So you might be at a busy train station and see something interesting worth taking a photo of. You want to document that, so you take that photo. You need to be able to shoot that photo as quickly as possible. So to do that, using manual shooting modes isn't necessarily your best friend, because it takes time to get your camera out and change the settings and then quickly take your photo and then realize, oh, it's out of focus, quickly change the settings again. And that event, that person's walked past, that event has now gone. So you've missed that opportunity. So it's about finding that balance between photographic sort of creative input and do I want to have a slow shutter speed, like having that control of the exposure versus actually capturing the event and not missing it happening. So it's about determining what's more important. Is it more important to have that shallow depth of field, or is it more important just to take that photo? So it's about determining in the moment, how long do I have? Do I have 1 second? Do I have 10 seconds? What's happening here? So assessing what's happening in the moment and then making a decision based on that. So typically you would use one of the automatic modes. I mean, let's not say automatic, full automatic, but maybe you could use either a shutter priority or an aperture priority. So if you know, say for instance with this photo, say you're at a train station and you're trying to capture a photo similar to this one, you know you want to capture a blurred image of the train going past, you can put it in shutter priority, and you can, which means you select the shutter speed and the camera chooses the other aperture, the other exposure settings. So you put it in shutter priority and you set it to a 60th of a second. So, and you can set it to whatever, you can set it to a second, 5 seconds, quarter of a second, and you can just test that shutter speed until you know that, okay, this is the perfect shutter speed to capture that train going past and getting the blurred motion image that I want. Now all I need to do is find the right subject. So then you can walk around up and down that train station, then you find this subject here, this one, and you're happy with that one, and then you take the photo. You've got the shutter speed set up, the camera does the rest of it. So that's one way of doing it. The other way of doing it is the aperture priority, where you choose the aperture, so you know you want a shallow depth of field, and then the camera will choose the shutter speed based on that. So typically photojournalists and documentary photographers will try and decide whether they have the time to make the creative decisions on the exposure and control the image that way, or they will determine in that moment, or do I have the time to make those decisions, or do I only have the time to just put it in automatic and take a photo? So sometimes you might have to just quickly flick your camera to automatic and press go, take the button. But it's about being quick and analyzing a scene as quick as possible. Editing. So a big part of this type of photography is that it is accurate, and photo should be an accurate representation of the place or the person or the thing or the event. So editing images afterwards in Photoshop, like we all know how powerful Photoshop is and how much you can change an image with that software and other softwares as well. So the ethical question is how much is acceptable, how much is unacceptable, and usually in most news, news organizations of integrity will usually say that photojournalists or news photographers can only make minor exposure adjustments to their image and can slightly increase the contrast. There will be like very restricted limitations on what editing changes they can make to their images, because a photographer goes out, takes a photo, submits it to the newspaper, and then the newspaper doesn't know how it's been changed. They publish it, then the next day they find out that image is a lie because there was a politician that was photoshopped out of this image or whatever. So they have to have those policies in place where the photographer is responsible for the editing of this image, and they're only allowed to edit it, to X amount. So if it's edited beyond that, then the photographer's done the wrong thing. So yeah, there is a grey area though with this type of photography, because typically like news photography, journalism, and sports these types of photography, the photographer is expected to accurately document an event, but they also want to take beautiful photos. So sometimes the question is there, how important, say, take this example of this photo here, like how important is this person to this photograph? Is it acceptable to clone that person out of that image? If it doesn't affect the actual like integrity of the photograph, the message of the photograph, the subject of the photograph, if it's just something in the background, then is it that big of a deal to remove it? If you say no, then okay, well, is it okay to remove this person? Yes or no? Oh, okay, yes or no. Okay, well then, is it okay to change the color of this boy's shirt? Like, where do you draw the line? So that's typically why they have a zero policy, and just nothing's allowed to be changed, because then you have grey areas. Well, or if it's all right to do it in this image, is it okay to do it in this image? And then those lines can be crossed. And then the big question is, if it's acceptable in, say you have a newspaper, and in one section you've got a story about some politician doing something, and it's unacceptable to edit that image because it's telling the news. But then in the next page you've got a lifestyle image about house designs, and then like that you have images there that are overly edited. Or is it ethical in the same publication to have images on this page that are not edited at all, and then because of ethical reasons, then images on this page edited like entirely because it's lifestyle? So there's a lot of grey areas in this form of photography, and I don't really know why I went on this massive tangent, but basically determining what your style, the genre of photography is that you're doing, and knowing the limitations on how much editing you can do is an important thing as well. So the major part of this type of photography is that it is a form of storytelling, so it should be able to tell a story without the words. So a person should be able to flick through a newspaper and look at the photos, as most people do, and know exactly what that story is about just by looking at that photograph. So they have to be dramatic, they have to be powerful images, and quite often there's not much you can do in terms of making an image powerful. It's about the subject. So it's about finding an interesting subject. So in this regard, it's about, documentary photography and photojournalism, that sort of thing, is about having an interesting enough subject that tells the story. So that because you don't have time, because you're not allowed to edit it, and because you don't have time to make, adjustments to have slow shutter speeds or shallow depth of fields and that sort of thing. So really you're relying on your composition, which we'll get to, and your subject to carry the weight. And then we want to talk about composition as well. So again, as we don't have the time to muck around with some of those other creative avenues, what we can do is control the composition. So we can make sure, a few big ones are obviously rule of thirds is a very common one, because it's easy, because you can, no matter where you are, you can always create a rule of thirds image. And framing is also quite prevalent in this field, because you can shoot through windows. You can frame a person by blurring them out and having a crowded group of people around them that draws attention towards this person that you're trying to frame. So framing and rule of thirds are generally some of the more common ones used in this style of photography, but just knowing that you have to be consciously aware of what you're taking a photo of, and being aware of what things are around you that you can include into a composition. So, there's a window, I could use that as a framing thing. There's a thing on the ground, I can use it as leading lines. So just being aware of your surroundings and how you can compose an image based on what you have available to you. And finally, lighting as well. So again, you have to be fast, you have to be in the moment, and you have to be creative. So in this example, using natural light and what's coming through a window, what's coming from natural sources, and using it in a creative way to really add depth to your image. So having a strong understanding of lighting and how it affects the scene that you're currently photographing, and having an awareness of changes to your positioning, to your camera settings, and to the scene itself, and how that'll affect the image. So having just a strong awareness of natural lighting around you. And then if you've got time, like this version here with the wedding photography, set up some more intricate lighting techniques. So in this example, this is a technique called high speed sync, which I won't get into, but you can research it yourself. It's called high speed sync. And this is where the photographer will essentially, if you ignore these people here, this is essentially an image that's exposed for the background, which is quite dark because it's sunset. So if you were to set your exposure for the background, the people in the foreground are going to be really dark, just because at that time of day, that's just the way it is. Because the sun's in the background, the people here are going to be backlit. They're going to be dark. So you have to then put light, or you could expose for the people, which means the background is going to be really bright, because in order to have these light enough, then the background will be overexposed. So you have to create this effect, to have a well-lit background, a well-lit people subject. You do this technique called high-speed sync, where you expose for the background, and then you use a high-speed flash, which would be like a portable flash, usually, because it can just pop a burst of light that's high speed. That's a lot faster than bigger light sources like softboxes and that sort of thing. And then it's fast enough to pop a real quick burst of light to light these people up as you see fit, while maintaining that background that you want. That's a very complicated technique, and it's worth a whole lot of research, and also you need the equipment available to do that. But that is a common one used in wedding photography, and also in sports photography and sports portraiture and that sort of thing. But the main thing is having awareness of the lighting that's available to you, and working with it in creative ways to complement your image. So those are the 6 key concepts of documentary photography. I will just go through them again quickly. So we've got genre variations. So documentary photography covers editorial, sport, wedding, travel, photojournalism, but essentially it's all the same. It's about documenting people, places, and things, and telling those stories accurately. You need to be fast. You need to be in the moment. So you need to use automatic modes, because manual modes can be slow and cumbersome. You're not allowed to edit. You shouldn't edit these images, because the priority of these images is to document the thing, place, or event accurately. So if you edit the image in a way that's manipulating the original thing of the image, then you are no longer producing documentary photography. It needs to tell a story, so you need to find subjects that are interesting and tell the story themselves, because you can't muck around with editing and automatic modes. So you need a subject that tells a story for you. So you need interesting and compelling subjects. You can control the composition though, so be aware of your surroundings, be aware of what's in the scene, and be aware of ways that you can work that in a creative way to make a composition that is compelling. And do the same thing with lighting. Remember that there is natural light source coming through windows, from downlights, from phone torches, and work in these light sources that are available to you in a creative way. So those are the 6 key concepts of documentary photography. Some of these concepts are quite complicated, so you might want to go back and watch it again, or you might want to see how they relate to other areas to solidify your understanding of this field of photography. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and take care.